Just when I thought I had a mental picture of what goes on at abortion clinics, a movie like Unplanned is released. Parishioners have recommended it to me, so I watched it the other night. It is the true story of the conversion of Abby Johnson, who used to be the director of a Planned Parenthood clinic in Texas. Three scenes in the movie were especially powerful. First, Abby had become pregnant, and ironically, after a day of performing 38 abortions, her fellow employees threw a baby shower at the abortion clinic after they locked up. Second, even though Abby had worked her way up from volunteer to counselor to clinic director, she never participated in performing an abortion. Her conversion began when she was asked on short notice to assist the doctor by holding the ultrasound. She viewed the baby in the womb and heard the heartbeat, then saw the suction device rip the child apart limb by limb, and the baby's heartbeat raced as it tried to avoid the instrument of death. Lastly, Abby herself had undergone 2 abortions years earlier, but was never allowed to see the ultrasound of her baby before the procedure. So she looked up her medical record and saw one of her children and broke down crying. This weekend is Respect Life Sunday, and movies like Unplanned are good at illustrating the horrors of something we typically only discuss in abstract terms. It takes brave souls to stand up and illustrate the poor positions that we have held in history to change hearts. Think of slavery. It was a lucrative business and vital to the economy of the New World. Yet people like St. Peter Claver painted a different picture. The journey across the Atlantic Ocean took several months, and the conditions aboard the slave ships were foul and inhumane. The slaves were chained to one another like cordwood, with little food or water. Human waste smeared the floor, and disease was rampant. Thus, 1/3 of the slaves died in transit. In the port city of Cartagena, now Colombia, St. Peter Claver greeted each boat. He rushed into their putrid hulls and brought fresh fruit and cared for the sick. His letters illustrated the true horrors of slavery, and his actions showed the true dignity of the individuals he ministered to. Today, no one debates the morality of slavery. Like Peter Claver, it's time to rush into the putrid debate over the dignity of each human life. How can we expect to make progress on topics of racism, immigration, gender inequality, etc., if we don't respect life when it begins in the womb? Life is sacred because we are made in God's image and likeness, and Christ himself took on a body. Christ entered our world through the womb of a woman who made a courageous choice to become pregnant and carried Jesus to term under much hardship. Mary and Joseph even protected their child's life from the tyrannical government of King Herod, who murdered young boys in Bethlehem while searching for Jesus. Look at Mary and Joseph's choices and compare them to our pro-choice ideology in states such as New York and Delaware. Bishop Robert Barron wrote, "If a mother chooses to bring her baby to term and to be born, that child is, somehow by that choice, the subject of dignity and worthy of the full protection of the law. And if a mother chooses otherwise, even a newborn baby struggling to breathe on an operating table can be murdered and discarded in those states like so much garbage. Biology and metaphysics be damned," he wrote. "Our subjective decisions determine reality, and the result is state-sanctioned infanticide." Infanticide is not new, but a return to a time before Christianity influenced the planet. In ancient Rome, a child did not achieve personhood and rights until the father recognized it. When a mother gave birth, the midwife placed the child on the floor. The father would examine the child and decide whether to keep the baby. The typical reasons for discarding a child were suspicion of adultery, not wanting the expense of a daughter, or the child had a birth defect. Human life for pagans began only when the child was accepted. If the child was not picked off the floor by the father, then it was drowned in a bucket or left to die of exposure at the city dump. Is this a far cry from where we are currently at? In our first reading, the prophet Habakkuk cried out to God, "How long, O Israel? I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you violence, but you do not intervene." Doesn't this resonate in our hearts as we face an era that has been called the culture of death? God finally responded to Habakkuk's cry for help with a vision to write down on stone tablets for future generations to see. God responded that he was still in charge, and we are not without recourse in our prayers. Sadly, the movie Unplanned made it clear that when we want a child, let's have a party. When we don't, dispose of him or her as medical waste. St. Mother Teresa said, "An unborn child has been carved into the hand of God from conception, and is called by God to love and to be loved, not only now in this life, but forever."